Good morning. Welcome to Truth for Today. This is Dai-Qing Yuan, your host and teacher, pastor of Abilene Bible Church. Today we're continuing our study of the 5 pillars of Matthew, and today we enter the 5th pillar. It is actually the main reason why we studied the 5 pillars of Matthew, because the Olivet Discourse, is the bridge between Daniel and Revelation. Okay, and it's probably the most important uh, passages in the Bible. Well, everywhere is important, but it's one of those most important ones and the most misunderstood ones. And misunderstanding this, then you cannot connect Daniel and Revelation, or rather Old Testament and New Testament. So let's see the session 5.1, lesson 5.1, the Olivet Discourse in layers. Matthew 24, 1 through 31. Okay, now we are in the project of studying the eschatology through comparative study of 3 books, Daniel, Matthew, and Revelation. Daniel is about the visible kingdom, which is Israel. It rose and fell, and at his time there is a promised restoration. And then when the restorer came, that's Jesus Christ, he gave a spiritual kingdom rather than restoring the physical kingdom. And then the spiritual kingdom is the church. He gave the design in the first pillar, the presentation to Israel in the second pillar, the predicted stages in the third pillar, the key for kingdom life in the fourth pillar, and now is the 5th pillar, which is the transition from the spiritual kingdom to the full kingdom. Okay, the spiritual kingdom is here, but the full kingdom later. But there will be a period of transition. That's called the tribulation. And in Revelation, it's talking about the coming of the full kingdom, which is the millennium. However, there will be tribulation. You see, Christ in glory, church age, then the things to come. Among the things to come, this is things that you saw, John saw. This is things that's church age, and these are all things to come, which includes the rapture, tribulation, second coming, millennium, which is the full kingdom, and the eternal state, which is also the full kingdom for the eternity. All right, so that's the big picture. Okay, we are in the 5th pillar of Matthew, the 5th discourse, called the Olivet Discourse, because it was given on Mount Olivet by Jesus Christ in the evening of Wednesday of the Passion Week. Okay, on Thursday he took the Last Supper. Okay, and on Sunday he entered the city in triumphal entry, and then on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he did debates with people in a temple. In the middle, he cursed the tree, and then the tree withered. And then the 3rd day, Wednesday, 4th day, actually, the week, he did the Olivet Discourse. Okay, it's about the transition to the spiritual kingdom. Okay, now let's review the progression of the kingdom of God. From creation to Abraham was the fuzzy kingdom, circa 2,000 years, pre-Israelite period. From Abraham to Christ, visible kingdom. Okay, it's all about Israel. Visible people, nation, land, city, temple, priest, king, and the law. However, not all Israel who are descended from Israel. They are not all Israel who are descended from Israel. In other words, not all visible kingdom members are spiritual. Okay, so not all Israelites are true Israelites. The true Israelites are true believers of God, and when Christ came, they become believers of Christ. So the second stage was circa 2,000 years. It's Israelite period. When Jesus came, he gave us the spiritual kingdom, which is called the unshakable kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, when heaven and earth has a connection. Whatever is bound here is bound up there. What is loose here is loosed up there. So the church is the kingdom of heaven, when heaven and earth connect in a certain way, and kind of a pre-taste of life in heaven. This is called the church age, the age of grace, and it's already spiritual kingdom, but not yet full kingdom. So when it's full kingdom, it will become both spiritual and visible. That's the full kingdom. So that begins at the second coming. So from first to second coming of Christ, circa 2,000 years. And then from the second coming and to the last judgment is the full kingdom. It's circa 1,000 years. That's called the millennium. So the Old Testament revealed the first two stages, and the New Testament revealed the last two stages. So we have 2, 2, 2, 1. So altogether 7,000 years, like 7 days of the creation week. It seems that the creation week is a prediction of all time, all history, with 6 days of God working. For God, a day is like 1,000 years. So 6,000 years of working and 1,000 years of rest, which is the millennium. We are here in the spiritual kingdom near its end. Okay, and Christ in the Olivet Discourse, which he did here, he predicted the transition to the full kingdom in the end time. Okay, now this is the paradigm of Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay, that's the promised restoration of Israel. Okay, Israel fell in, well, Israel and Judah. Israel, the northern kingdom, Israel had 390 years with a gap on David, Solomon. And the southern kingdom, Judah, had 490 years with a gap on David, Solomon. And the 490 years is because they didn't observe 70 sabbatical years. Okay, Israel was majored in religious sin and then made it full with social sin. Judah was majored in social sin, which is not reducing social tension through the sabbatical years, and then they added with the religious sin of Manasseh, going into full-fledged idolatry. Okay, so they all had their sins full and they're all gone. But God did not forget them. God put them on a shelf. God will restore them at the end, which is what the 70 weeks of Daniel is about. So the 70 weeks of Daniel has 3 stages. There is a 7 times 7, which 49 years. That's from the edict of the word to the rebuild the city of Jerusalem, to the city that has been rebuilt with plaza and moat. Okay, and we know that in the beginning, when the edict was given by Artaxerxes to Nehemiah, he came back and built the wall. But when it has plaza and moat fully rebuilt, that was 69 years later. And then there's another 62 sevens, or 434 years. Altogether, 483 years. And then that's when the Messiah shall become, and he will be cut off. The anointed king will be cut off. Well, Jesus Christ is the anointed king. How did he get cut off? Well, the year was right only if you use the prophetic years. Okay, that's 360 days. And then you reach 80-33. If you use the normal tropical years, it will be 80-40. So there are many potential beginnings and then potential ends. So people try to fit in the shoes of the Messiah. Okay, many times. There are many pretenders for the position of the Messiah, but only Jesus Christ was correct, was the real one. Okay, but how was he real? Well, it's by the standard given in Revelation, when all of the years are counted in prophetic years. For the so 483 become 476. Okay, so before him, the Seleucid era, they started from 312 BC, and then the Maccabees manipulated the Greek translation, which is called Old Greek translation of Daniel. They make the years add up. 7 plus 70 plus 62 is 139 years. So you starting from the Seleucid era at the beginning, you get 173 years. That's when Onias III, the last legitimate high priest, was defrocked by Antiochus IV. And that's when the resistance arose. That's the Maccabees. So by manipulating the translation this way, the Maccabees believe that they may be the Messiah. Okay, and then let's say Jeremiah's word saying 605 BC, the first captivity. If you start from there, after 483 tropical years, well, you get 122 BC. No one fits that. If you're from 476 tropical years, which is using the prophetic year, 483 prophetic year, you get 117, no one fitting there. But if you count from Cyrus' decree in 536 BC to rebuild the temple, you use a regular 483 years, you get 53 BC. Well, no one really fit. And if you use prophetic year 60 BC, also no one fit. But if you start from Darius 520 BC to continue rebuild the temple, from that edict, you use the regular years, you get 37 BC. Oh, that is the year when Herod the Great conquered Jerusalem and become actually the king of the Jews. So he fits one at a time. And that's why I believe he was told that you are potentially the Messiah, and then the decree for you is continuing to rebuild the temple. And guess what he did? He continued to rebuild the temple. And yeah, if you use the prophetic year, then no one fit. But if you use Artaxerxes to Ezra, his first decree, to rebuild the law, you use the regular year, you get 80-25. Well, maybe that's the time that John the Baptist began his ministry. But it doesn't fit Jesus. He didn't begin his ministry until 29. And if you use prophetic year, you get 80-18, no one. But if you use the second decree from Artaxerxes, it was to Nehemiah in 444 BC. You use the regular years, you get 80-40. Herod Agrippa I became the king of the Jews in that year. So he must have been told, you are potentially the Messiah, and your duty is to cleanse our country of the heretics. So he started to kill Christians. He killed James the Great, James the Greater, who's James, son of Zebedee, older brother of John the Apostle. And then he jailed Peter, and he was about to kill Peter before the angels released Peter. Okay, so those are for Herod Agrippa. But Jesus came and he was glorified in AD 33. This would fit if you use the prophetic year and then starting from the Artaxerxes time. Okay, and then Jesus also predict that he, well, here we're going to hear that people perceive that he said he might come back in one generation. Okay, so that is 40 years. And then if you take 40 years from 33, you get 73. And you minus 7 for tribulation, you get 66. And that is the time when the zealots thought that they could become the Messiah. Okay, and then finally it ends up, well, the zealots failed, and Vespasian became the emperor of Rome. And then Josephus said, Vespasian, you are the promised Messiah. Okay, so a leader arises from Judea and becomes the king of the world. And that's how Josephus got a good pension. Okay, and he was able to write books. But the Pharisaic rabbis who survived AD 70, they made up another theory. They make the fall of the first temple exactly 490 years before the fall of the second temple. So it made it to fall in 322 BC. It wasn't. It was actually 586. But they made it that way so that 70 years later, they started counting of 483 years. Okay, and then you get 8132, Bar Kokhba. Okay, so yeah, from 70 AD, you go back 480, you get 400, 400 something, and then you minus 70, you get 322. And from there, you get 483, you got 8032. That's for Bar Kokhba. So you can see that the prophecy is all about how to interpret and fitting the shoes of the 70 weeks of Daniel. But if you understand as the author intended in Daniel, it seems that the Messiah being cut off fits at Jesus Christ, but by a unit, the prophetic year that wasn't known, wasn't revealed to humankind until the book of Revelation was published in 96. Before then, neither humans nor the devil understood the unit. They all thought it was tropical years. Okay, so we had Herod the Great and Herod Agrippa the first as pretenders. Okay, and then Jesus Christ actually was the one, and then Jesus Christ was cut off when he was ascended into heaven, when he was taken into heaven, and then he's the king of Israel, but he's above, he's over there, and then his people are on the earth. And that's how the Messiah kingdom, anointed king, is cut off. Okay, it's not the crucifixion, not cut off by man, but cut off by God, because he was taken up. Okay, and after that there is a gap. Okay, in the time there is a parenthesis when the church age was inserted. Okay, and that's from the Pentecost of AD 33 till the rapture in the future. Okay, during this time there will be a desolation of the land. Okay, and then the temple and the city are destroyed, and then it will be by the people of the prince to come. We know that it was by Rome, right? It was realized in AD 70, and therefore at the end there will be war, but the temple will be rebuilt, and by the prince to come in a covenant with many. The prince to come is not Christ. The prince to come is the Antichrist. He will make covenant with many, I believe, the Jews, to rebuild their temple. And therefore they support him because he will bless them. But then the covenant will be broken, and then it will become the abomination of desolation. In other words, the tribulation, 7 years, became the great tribulation in the second half. Okay, the covenant was signed in the beginning, it was broken in the middle. Okay, there's a 3.5 years when the earth appeared to have peace under the Antichrist, and then the great persecution began, and the great tribulation began. And the last 3.5 years is called times and half a time. It was equal to 42 months, equal to 1260 days. So you can calculate that a month is 30 days and a year is 360 days. This was revealed in the book of Revelation, which was published in AD 96. Okay, so prophetic years 360 days, but 383 prophetic years would become 476 tropical years, 7 years shorter. Okay, that's how Jesus would fit into the time of prophecy. And then after the greater tribulation of the 3.5 years, the second 3.5 years, Christ will come, tribulation will end, and then it's the final destruction of the evil on the earth. Then the millennium will begin. So that is the paradigm that had been set by the book of Daniel. Okay, and how will Jesus interpret this? Okay, that's what is told in the Olivet Discourse. Let's talk about the Passion Week of Christ, okay, the whole week. In the Passion Week of AD 33, Jesus did, first of all, on Sunday, which is called Palm Sunday today, Nisan 10th, which is the day of choosing lambs. In Julian calendar, it's March 29th. Okay, he did the triumphal entry. Okay, riding not a horse, which will say he's a warrior, not a mule, which will say he's the king, but he rode a colt, which means he came as a servant. He presented himself as the Lamb of God. Okay, then in Monday to Wednesday, he debated in the temple for 3 days. On Monday, March 30th, he cursed the fig tree, which is representing Israel. On Tuesday, March 31st, the fig tree died or withered. That means Israel is now shelved by God. And then on Wednesday, it's called Spy Wednesday. That's when Judas sold him. So Judas arranged the betrayal, and Jesus gave 8 curses on Pharisaism in Matthew 23, which is the opposite of the 8 blessings of the Beatitudes. No surprise. Okay, and then in the evening he gave the Olivet Discourse, which is Matthew 24 to 25. Okay, then on Thursday, which is called Maundy Thursday, he Nisan 14th, that's the Passover Eve, or April the 2nd in Julian calendar. He did the Last Supper. The Maundy means mandatum in Latin. It means command. Okay, Jesus commanded them to love one another at the Last Supper when he washed the disciples' feet. And then he presented by foot washing of Jesus on the disciples. Okay, he gave the command when he did that foot washing. Okay, on the Friday, which is called Good Friday today, Nisan 15th, the Passover day, or April 3rd in Julian calendar, April 1st in Gregorian calendar. Okay, he did the crucifixion. Okay, and on Sunday, Easter Sunday, or Nisan 17th, it's also called the first fruits, defined as the first Sunday after the Passover. In Julian calendar, April 5th, Gregorian calendar, April 3rd, he had the resurrection. So that is the Passion Week. And when did Jesus give the Olivet Discourse? In Wednesday. Okay, on Wednesday evening. Okay, the Olivet Discourse. Okay. So in the beginning of the Olivet Discourse, he predicted the fate of the temple. Matthew 24, verses 1 through 2. I'm reading the Hebrew Matthew according to Shem Tov. That was a Middle Ages Jewish apologist. And he copied the Gospel of Matthew in Hebrew, and he wrote a commentary defending the Jewish faith against Christians. Okay, well, it was discovered later, and now we can strip the commentary and then only keep the original words. Thus, we have the Hebrew Matthew. This was already discovered in not long after the Reformation. However, it has always been thought as a translation into Hebrew from Greek not until the 1990s, when George Howard, professor of Hebrew studies in University of Georgia, and then George Mason maybe, but anyway, he translated the Bible, the Hebrew Matthew, into English, and I studied it, and I found out it has many literary markers that are matching the divisions of Jesus' sermons, okay, in structure. So in Sermon on the Mount, there are 8 blessings, and there are 8 sermonettes illustrating and applying each blessings. This structure, this correspondence was discovered by me. Okay, I'll try to make it into a dissertation, but it didn't go through. But we can publish it later in books. But the point is, I discovered that the Hebrew Matthew is more likely the original, and while the Greek Matthew is more likely the translation. Okay, I have presented to you through our sermons and the TV programs both the comparative study of both Hebrew Matthew and the Greek Matthew. For the Greek Matthew, I'm using the New American Standard Version, the updated version, okay, which is 1997 version. Okay, so I'm going to read both. Let you compare and see. Okay, here in 24, 1 through 2. It came to pass when Jesus went out from the temple. As he was going, his disciples drew near to show him the building of the temple. He said, "You see all these. Truly I say to you, that all will be destroyed, and there will not be left there one stone upon another." Okay, that's Hebrew Matthew. Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up and pointed out the temple building to him. Okay, here it says show him. Okay, point it out. Okay, and he said to them, "Do not Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down. Okay, so they are saying basically the same thing. Now, let's see comparative versions of the Olivet Discourse in Mark 13 and Luke 21. Okay, in Mark 13, as he was going out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, behold, what wonderful stones and what wonderful buildings." And Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." As we know, the Gospel of Mark is actually Mark's note of the sermons of Peter in Rome. Okay, and he did the sermon according to a Hebrew Matthew, most likely. So that structure is the same, but he added personal experience as the illustration. Okay, so Luke 21 says, and while some were talking about the temple, that it was adorned and beautiful stones and votive gifts, he said, as for these things which you are looking at, the days will come in which there will not be left one stone upon another, which will not be torn down. So Luke's gospel is the result of his survey, and they all said the same thing. God bless his word.